Buckaroos, welcome back to Musicom Academy. Today we're going to talk about firing people because you know it's going to come up. It's the opposite part of hiring people and hiring talent. At some point, you're going to have to let somebody go. And, you know, there's really a process to it. And, there's a lot of pitfalls. And there's also some things that you should be thinking about. And I'm going to go through them with you today, okay? This is my thoughts on it. This is how I've done it. I'm sure there's other ways, and HR will tell you some particular other ways that usually are pretty good. And I'll go through that in a second. But first off, let me start with this. There was a period, about a 3-year period, where I got fired 3 times. Like boom, boom, boom. Each time was the exact same reason. The owners were selling the radio station, usually for record money. They've never got that amount of money before, so they let the stations, go. It was right at the start of consolidation, and this was back in the 80s. Okay, so it was like bang, bang, bang. And what that does when you get fired, it does a couple things, at least that I think that it does. And, and one of them is good, and one of them is really good. The first one is it makes you cold to firing somebody else. I know that sounds horrible, but, bear with me and I'll go through it. When you've been fired yourself, you know what the other person is going through, and you realize, particularly after 3 times, for sure after 3 times, you realize it's just part of business. It's a transaction that just happens and happens over and over again. So it makes you a little bit immune to it, so you can process it and go at it objectively and try to do the best you can. The other thing that it does is, which is really good, it makes you empathetic to the person because you know what they're about to go through. They're shell-shocked, they're nervous, they're afraid to go home, they're embarrassed, they're lost as to what to do next. Perhaps they're in a financial bind now that, you're putting them in by letting them go. It's just a bad situation on the other side of the table, from you when you're the boss and you're the PD. I think by being fired a few times, it gives you the knowledge of all of that so you can approach it correctly. And at least it did for me anyway, and hopefully it will do for you. I think the number one thing that you need to do in going through it is you need to really be thinking about the other person and be kind to the other person as much as you can, given the situation that you're in. I'm also, just to let you know, I'm going to give you, but they seem to resonate, I'm going to give you 3 real-life stories that happened to me when I had to let someone go, and I'll take you through them and talk in great detail about them so you get a feel for what it's like to be on one end of the table, letting someone else go, and there's, and the ramifications of doing it right, so that you get a feel for it and you understand it and you learn it. Before you let them go, make sure that you absolutely really need to let them go. Have you gone through every possible thing that you can do with them, to improve them or, get them to be where they don't need to get fired? Have you done it all? Before your meeting, put yourself in their shoes and think it through. Like, what are you going to say? Like, how are you going to start the meeting? If somebody starts asking you questions, are you going to answer them or are you not going to answer them? Or do you actually have an answer for them? I've found that, and HR will tell you pretty much not to do this, but I found that in most situations when somebody gets fired, they want to know why. I mean, it's kind of obvious. I wanted to know why every time I got fired. The answer was always the same. We just bought the radio station. We want to bring in our own people. Okay, got it. Totally understand. Didn't like it, but understood it. It wasn't really personal. But when it's personal, somebody wants an explanation. And sometimes you can give it. Sometimes you can't. If you can, at least a little bit, it helps to get a little closure for the person that you're firing. So think about all of that ahead of time and think about what you're going to say. And sometimes there's certain things that you can say, that they're not the best in the world, but at least it leaves the person with something, if they're true. I mean, that's a big one if they're true. One is, the easy one, it's corporate. They're blowing out 100 people across the country, and I'm sorry, but, it's you. It's just a numbers thing. I didn't even get a choice in this. I mean, that's one. Okay. Basically, you blame it on corporate. Again, HR will tell you never to do that, but everybody knows. I mean, if corporate blows out 100 people across the country or 200 or whatever, they already have an impression, typically bad, of the corporation itself. Let's not be under illusions that you can hide stuff like that. That's just not going to happen. Another way is, I just got hired. I have to turn this baby around really fast. That's what my job is, and my job is on the line. I think maybe I could actually get you up to where I needed to be, but it's going to take me 4, 5, 6 months, and I don't have that leeway of luxury of time. I got to hit the ground running right this moment. Another one is that, you need to shake things up, just like a ball team. Is you need to make sure that somebody who's listening knows that a whole bunch of things are happening at the radio station now that are new. It's not the same old, and you have to do that by changing some people. It's just like trading for ball players or bringing in new rookies onto a ball team that isn't performing. Then there's severance. Now, if you're smart, and the company is smart, they will pay what's due. They won't really mess around with it. Some companies go a little over, just so somebody is a little happier, or they won't sue. Some people go a little under, what it should be, in hopes that maybe the person doesn't notice it or isn't quite sure. Not the best thing in the world to do, but at least they're close to the real amount. You want to be at the real amount, because it solves a lot of problems that will pop up down the road if the person goes to a lawyer. One other thing about lawyers, sometimes people have a mistaken impression, and I know this because my daughter, she's an employment lawyer, so I get all this stuff all the time. When someone is fired for cause, they pretty much basically legally have to kill somebody in the building. I mean, it's really difficult to fire somebody for cause. A lot of times, some manager doesn't understand, or even an owner doesn't understand, I'll fire them for cause. I don't have to pay them severance. Yeah, good luck with that. I mean, they have to be stealing from you, and you have to be able to prove it. And, and I don't mean like ballpoint pens or something. I mean something that's substantial, or come in drunk and go nuts on the air and, and start slagging stuff where maybe they're causing a lawsuit for the company, given what they're saying. In other words, they have to do something incredibly bad to get fired for cause. All the normal things, even all the normal bad things, that an employee will do doesn't justify cause. And, if you get sued, you will lose. That might be your head. So just bear that in mind. If somebody starts talking about cause, it's like, whoa, dude, time out. Let's get a lawyer in here and see what they say, because I don't think that's going to fly. And it won't. If you're lucky, you have an employment contract with the person, particularly in air talent, that'll spell out what the severance is. It spells out time. It spells out everything. I mean, those are the good ones, because everybody knows, as soon as the meeting starts and the person, and you have to let someone know that they're being let go at that moment, you can go to the contract and just start going through it. And that'll be fine. Ideally, you have an HR person in the room with you, so that at the end of the meeting, you essentially hand the person to the HR person, and they will take them away and get them squared away with the paperwork and all the things that they need, and getting their keys and cleaning out their locker or whatever, that sort of stuff. Now, what HR is going to tell you is basically don't like chit chat with them in the beginning. Get to it pretty quick. As soon as they come in and sit down, hey, we want to talk to you. Get right to it. John, I have to let you go. Get into that quick. Okay. Don't, how's the kids? How's everything? Everything okay? All of that sort of stuff. Don't be doing that, because it's like mixed messages, and it's really bizarre, because at the point where you say, I'm going to let you go, that other person isn't even hearing you. Their mind just goes into all those other things that I just mentioned, beforehand, of how am I going to tell my wife? I'm embarrassed. What am I going to do next? Money, all of those things, they're going to tune out, and you have to kind of reel them back in to hear what you're saying. At that point, you tell them what the severance is, what the next procedures are. Again, maybe HR will just take over at that point. Lastly, in this area, if their demeanor allows it, and you have to be judging how they're taking this, I personally like to offer a few things. I would, because it's not that hard to do. Again, sometimes HR won't want you to do that. A big corporation won't want them coming back into the building, but you have to understand, if they're caught unprepared, if they don't have an air check, if they're on the air, to mail out and stuff, I would offer to let them use the studio. If you had to, you could just let somebody kind of sit with them while they're cutting up air checks or something like that, somebody that they know, and usually, almost always, they'll be fine, because they will appreciate that you're doing it. I don't mind talking through, options with them. Again, if their demeanor is such that, okay, man, what do I do now? Well, hey, you could do this, and there's a bunch of magazines that have jobs in them all the time. Let me give you a list of those. I'll email you a list of those to help you search. So in other words, here's some helping things, and offer it. And also a letter of recommendations if you feel comfortable doing that. Again, if it's part of that, 100 people being, laid off in a company, you could probably easily give a letter of recommendation. All of it helps. It makes the person a little bit more at ease, and it sort of tempers down what's going on right now, because one of the offshoots of this for sure is they're going to be mad because you just threw a hand grenade into their life. Now, let me tell you 3 stories that happened to me, and it just shows you why you really want to be kind, and you want to be thinking about what you do ahead of time and how you're going to handle it. I'm at a radio station, and I get brought in by the general manager, and he had worked there for a long time, and he got made the general manager, and he believed, and he was right in this, that the brunt of the entire program department needed to be changed, but they were all his friends, and he didn't want to do it. So basically, he sort of made me do it. I mean, he didn't force me into doing it. I could judge, and some people I didn't let go. But, there was a million hints going on constantly of, I don't know about him, I don't know about him, I don't know her, all of that usual stuff. And finally, it was like, are you pushing me to get rid of everybody? At which point he told me what I just told you. And I was like, okay, all right, well, let me go through. Now they understand what you're thinking here. And again, I didn't do everybody, but I did a sizable amount of the people. And one of them was a night guy who was on the air, and he was a super nice person. I really liked him. He was a great person, but he just wasn't good enough for where we wanted to take the radio station. And his skill level just wasn't high enough, and I don't think I could have gotten him up where it needed to be. So I let him go. About 2 months later, the station goes off the air. Okay, we're off the air, and it's afternoon drive on a Friday afternoon, and the log is jammed. And it's about 3:30, somewhere in there, and the chief engineer was on vacation, like in Hawaii or California or somewhere. He's gone. There's no one to get the station back on the air. I get reminded that person that I let go, the night person, he was the assistant chief engineer. He could get the radio station back on the air. So now I have to call this guy and ask him if he would do that. I mean, put yourself in that situation, okay? So I called him and I said, I explained the whole thing, and he goes, yeah, no problem. Okay, sure. If you want to come in the station, we can get you a key. He goes, no, I have a key. It's like, what? What? You have a key to the transmitter? Like, nobody took it from him, which is, astounding to me. So anyway, he had a key. I said, well, okay, cool. So like, what do you want to do? That I'll pay you pretty much whatever you want at this point. What would you like? I'm thinking he's going to pay like, say something like, $300, $500 or something. He goes, no, I don't want anything. I'm fine. No problem. I'll just go do it. No, come on. I want to pay you. No, I don't want to take anything. And this is somebody that I had let go 2 months earlier, and they would not take anything. They went out to the transmitter, dropped whatever they were doing because the station came on about 20 minutes later. Okay, so it's only off maybe a half hour at this point, which is incredible considering all the pieces of the situation. The closest corporate chief engineer in the next closest city is like 2.5 hour drive away. So that that's what we were looking at in all of afternoon drive on a major radio station off the air on a Friday afternoon with a full log. So that's one situation. Second situation, totally different, but again, you really have to be nice to people, and you got to care about what they're thinking and how they feel when you do it. If you don't, I'm telling you, you're a jerk for starters, and you shouldn't be that way, and you could be causing yourself huge problems down the road. I come into a radio station, it's an AC radio station, and they have a morning show and a morning guy who's doing it, who in my mind didn't fit the radio station because it's like a mainstream AC radio station. This is 15 years ago, so they're relatively less up-tempo than they are right now. The morning guy that I inherited walking in the door, his humor went toward, double entendre, blue stuff, no cursing, but I mean, he's walking that line, and he had a kind of a warped sense of humor, and he would sometimes say some pretty outrageous things, all the time being relatively funny, so he's doing a good show, but it was like oil and water that just didn't fit. So I had to let him go. So, I let him go, and, and everything, seemed to be cool, but you never really know, but it seemed to kind of go well. So let me flash forward now. It's 6 years later. I'm now not a PD anymore. I'm become the GM of a whole new radio station in a whole new city that I've never been in. I go out there and take a guess who the morning person is. Yeah, the guy I let go 6 years earlier. He's the morning person, and he's got nice numbers. They're good, and he fits the radio station like a glove because it's a rock radio station, so full-on rock radio station. And the show that he was doing on that AC station that didn't fit on this one, man, fit like a glove. So I'm listening going, this is great. I love it. This is awesome. But I got to walk into the radio station now and go, oh man, what's he going to be thinking when I walk through the door? Is he freaking? Is he wondering if I'm going to do it again? I don't even remember what we talked about, but we talked, a couple times briefly, not a lot. And, and I think I started with, hey, I know what happened before, something along these lines, but, I think your show is great. I have no problem with you. I'm good. Don't worry about anything happening. And which was the truth because, he did fit on the radio station. And I did everything I could from that point for the entire time that I was there to get him raises. I actually got him $1 million radio contract. I pushed for it. Corporate was good with it. I figured out how to do it in the budget and all that stuff because he deserved it. He fit like a glove on the radio station, but not on the other one. So, bear that in mind. So a lot of times it is not the talent. It is not the person. It's just the situation that they happen to be in. Let's go to a third one. This time it's a promotion director, and I thought that she could be the PD of the radio station that I was a GM with. So because she had been a lot of experience, she had been a PD before in a small radio station. She had a lot of experience in radio. Everybody liked her, and she would solve a lot of the people's problems. She's just a really good person to have in a building, and she's super new radio. And I figured whatever she doesn't quite know or needs help with, I'm there. I can help her and get her along. So I made her the PD, and she was doing a fine job. And all of a sudden, I start getting pushed by corporate. This will happen. Pushed by corporate to let her go. And it had nothing to do with her, had nothing to do with her ability, had nothing to do with anything. Really, what it had to do with was that her husband was the PD of a competing radio station in the market, an entirely different corporation. Now, I knew from knowing her and her husband, who I had also hired at one point, so both of them worked for me, and we're all friends. I've been at their wedding. I knew that they wouldn't talk to each other because, they'd be like this, as far as competition. And also, his radio station didn't really compete at all format-wise with, the station that she was running. So it was like no problem at all, but corporate just would not see it that way. And they kept telling me, hey, making you, maybe you should, maybe I think, what do you think about all of those things until finally it kind of came to, corporate wants you to do this or it's your job. But I couldn't explain why, because corporate specifically tells me that you can't tell why this occurred because we'll get sued and we'll lose. So, so I can't tell her. I really am not supposed to talk to her and all of that. And, and I'm sure the friendship definitely got ruined for a while. About maybe, 9 months down the road, she gets a job as a PD at another radio station, same market. Now this is a third corporation. And, and she's doing well, as I expected her to do. She's doing well. So I can't remember if I called her or something happened when we ran into each other. Anyway, I said, hey, we should get some lunch. So we did, and at this point, I'm retired. I'm out of it at this point. So I could care less about the corporation and whether they got sued and all of that sort of stuff. So at that point, it's still, that's what I was trying to tell you way in the beginning of this lesson. It's still a cloud over her head as we're having lunch of why she got fired. She thought she did something wrong. And so, I'm just like, no, man, you didn't do anything wrong. You did nothing wrong. And I explained everything I just told to you. I said, it was because your husband was at another radio station and they just couldn't understand that, there wouldn't be trade secrets going back and forth. Had nothing to do with you or your ability. And, I swear I could kind of see the cloud over her head just disappear and her demeanor change. And it's like, oh. And it was cool for me, and, we're all buddies again and all that sort of stuff. But that's when corporate gets involved and they force you to do stuff just like that, firing 100 people, and you've got 6 of them at your radio station. So those are the things that come up, and I wanted to tell you those 3 stories because they're so important, because in every one of those instances, if I didn't care about the other person and how they felt, and I didn't treat them as kind and with empathy as much as I possibly could doing that, they would have been a horror show later on down the road. But they weren't, because they all worked out, because essentially what you need to do, and what I'm telling you, is you need to treat the other person like a human being, like you'd want somebody to treat you, if you got let go. And having been on both sides of that table, it's easier to be the nice person letting somebody go than having a jerk on the other side come down on you. So hope all that helps. Hope it made sense to you. It's kind of a crappy subject to talk about, but again, if you're a boss, if you're a PD, it's going to come up, especially in this day and age, the way radio is. Don't forget to subscribe. Hey, last time I looked, but I don't know why, but for some reason, maybe it's the stories. Seem like the stories resonate with people, but really starting to crank up subscribers. It's really weird. I'm kind of seemed like 10 minutes ago I was looking for 400. Now, kind of coming up on 500. I think there's 486, 487 at the moment. And I'm cutting this, and this is probably going to be 2 weeks after I cut it when you get to see it. So who knows? We might be at 500 by that point. But it's really neat. If we get to 500 PDs for this course, that's a pretty sizable amount of PDs around the world wanting to learn how that job works. So, subscribe, hit the like button, hit the bell, all the usual good things. And I will see you on the next lesson. See ya!